is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Four divisional titles are still up for grabs as we enter week number 18 in the NFL. We're going to break down our outlook for those various divisions, at least the most competitive ones, and take a look at the futures markets. We get set for week 18. It's a big movement in the NFC based on what we saw in week 17. We'll talk to Ryan Williams for today, get his read on that futures market, talk about the AFC and the NFC South, and then I'll dive into what my numbers say about week 18 over at FanDuel Sportsbook. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Tuesday by Ryan Williams. Check him out on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. Ryan, Happy New Year to you. How you doing today?
Happy New Year, Jim. Happy 2024. Covering the spread of the new year. So very excited to get after it with you. And we're still talking about the 2023 season. So we got a fun week 18 on tap. It's been a minute. I feel like since we've had a situation like this where there's so much uncertainty heading into a week 18, that's usually, we're still new to the week 18, just even playing out in and of itself. But I just feel like, usually we're talking about, who's going to be sitting and, what's going to be happening, what kind of chaos are we going to see on week 18. And there's so much for a lot of teams to be playing for on Saturday and Sunday, as we'll have games on both days yet again. So I'm excited to see how this plays out.
I am as well. And I think that the fun thing about this is that it's a lot of fun teams that are still potentially fighting for the playoffs. I love watching CJ Stroud and the Texans. That game should be a thrill on Saturday night. We've got the Bills versus Dolphins to cap things off. So it should be a fun one for sure. We'll dive in, break down and read on the NFC South or the AFC South as well. And then talk about the NFC and how the general picture looks right there, given Philadelphia's loss and Dallas's win in week 17. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Back to a more regular schedule now with the holidays in our rearview mirror. Back with you Tuesday through Friday for this week, and then Monday through Friday for next week as well, with, of course, some primetime breakdowns via Tom Vecchio and Primetime Tom to get you ready for this week's key games. To get those as they are posted, make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find the regular shows on FanDuel TV Plus and FanDuel's YouTube page as well. Now, Ryan, let's begin things off by talking about the NFC, because there was a massive shakeup this past week. The Dallas Cowboys now in the driver's seat to win the NFC East, which gives them potentially the 2 seed if they can lock up a win against the Commanders on Sunday. And as a result, they are now down to plus 380 to win the NFC. The 49ers still the prohibitive favorites, minus 120. Eagles plus 550. The Lions plus 850. When you look at the NFC market right now, with where things stand, given we saw this past weekend, any value stand out to you with where those teams currently sit?
Yeah, I mean, the value is probably with San Fran at minus 120. If we're being honest, I am interested to learn this week about the Christian McCaffrey injury. They really tried their best on the broadcast of last week's game to kind of downplay what that meant. It was, he was cramping. Oh no, it was a hamstring. Oh, it's a calf strain. And we all know, what that means. Now, I will say, this is kind of like a system, and don't get me wrong, like Christian McCaffrey, I don't think they have a chance of winning it all without him. I know. Let's not forget, like at one point, they had a situation where like Eli Mitchell was running this thing with Trey Sermon and, other guys there. And it's like the system, right? Like, Brock Purdy's shown enough with Ayuk and Samuel and Kittle. Like this team is still pretty scary even without him. I think that's what made them leaps and bounds, the favorite here. If Dallas can handle business and win the division, I think that would get them the second seed, which would be interesting. I think that there's a lot that's been talked about with Dallas here. Can Dak do it? Are they are they Super Bowl capable with McCarthy? We just had the Ring of Honor this past weekend with Jimmy Johnson, and just throwing back to the 90s, and like that's been the whole narrative, is like, can this team get back to the promised land? And so I think with the way the defense is playing, and if you can get some home games out of it, I think that definitely is good for Dallas. But they've shown the propensity to kind of blow it in multiple spots. So they have to go out and prove it. And, I think this offense is really, they're still a little suspect, outside of CeeDee Lamb, who carried this team into, the position that they're in. Brandon Cooks has stepped up, so I'll give him his flowers. But, outside of those two guys, like, Tony Pollard hasn't been able to get going. Like, it's kind of tough. So then we look at Philly. Philly's plus 550 to be the NFC Championship winner. And we know this is a proven team who's been able to go on the road and, shock the world before. And it's like, is it really a shock to see the, defending Super Bowl, team, representative of the NFC, I should say, be there yet again? And so at 550, way that they could win the division. It's a long shot because Dallas is 13.5-point favorites on the road against the Commanders. But, if they handle business against the Giants, then, we'll see if Dallas can go on the road. I think Washington, they have a lot of issues there, but they do play divisional opponents pretty well. They've had some tough losses against Dallas in the past, historically, over the past couple seasons. But, 1-2, Washington's 1-2 against this team. And so I think at 550, if we were talking about this early in the year and you told me at any point that we'd get the Eagles at 550, I'd be willing to take them there. I think the Lions are a fun team. It's hard to, trust them to be the NFC Championship, just with the defense is really what's suspect to me. Yeah. I mean, defense just gives up so much. And, definitely when you're talking about playoffs, that's usually when you want to see your defense really coming into the fold. I love their front seven. I love how they pressure the quarterback, but the secondary is just so suspect that it makes it hard for me to choose them here.
I actually think they got a pretty big boost this past weekend, the Lions did, because with the Cowboys winning, that means that even if the Lions wind up being the three seed, their second round game would still be indoors. Like, they would face Dallas on the road, but it would be in a dome. And we know that Jared Goff, every offense, this is true of every offense, but like they're much better when they're playing indoors. So their path is indoor game in the first round, indoor game in the second round, and then on the road, likely against San Francisco in the NFC Championship game. For plus 850, that's not bad. CJ Gardner-Johnson did not play this past week, but I would guess he'd be active for the first round of the playoffs. Probably not going to play this week because, like, why bother with him? I mean, maybe to knock off the rust, but like they could get him back. And I think if I were forced to take someone right now, the Lions would be where I'd turn a plus 850, just because I think the path for them is pretty good. Also, Ryan, my pro dome agenda got a big boost this week because we did get the Cowboys up there. I want every game played in a dome. And now if we get the Cowboys at home too, not only does that benefit my son, Jared Goff, but also does benefit the pro dome agenda. So I think they were sneakily one of the bigger winners of what happened this past weekend.
That's a fair point, Jim. And I think if you're on that track, then let's look at. I guess we'll talk about. Well, no, let's talk about it now, because if we're gonna say that Lions plus 850, like, is a good value, or decent value from those odds, let's just look at them from Super Bowl, like Super Bowl plus 22-1, and it's at Allegiant Stadium indoors. Like, Jared Goff is a Super Bowl quarterback. He's been to the Super Bowl before. People making that trade with with Matthew Stafford involved, because he can do it. And it was all the talk this year about, like, well, the Lions are trying to do what they do, but they're still going to go after it with Jared Goff. And so that is interesting. I think for that reason alone, and that's been one of the biggest things for me with Jared Goff this whole year, is like, get this guy indoors, especially if he's not playing at home, because he's just not great in the outdoors, and that's been the case with the Rams. And so if I'm looking at it plus 850 and this team is making it, like, let's just go ahead and take them 22-1 to win the Super Bowl if that's the case.
I'm in. You talked me into it, Ryan. We're all aboard the Lions. Restore the roar, 22-1 to win the Super Bowl this year. Let's talk about some divisions that are still up for grabs, specifically the AFC and the NFC South. Let's begin things with the AFC South. Right now, the Jags are minus 225. Now, if you're betting on either the Colts or Texans to win this division, you are saying that team wins a game on Saturday night, and then the Jags lose to the Texans to the Titans on Sunday. So it's basically a 2-game parlay here, Ryan. Any interest for you in betting the Colts or Texans to win the AFC South, given you also need the Titans to win against the Jags on Sunday?
Yeah, I think there's some merit there. I'm interested to see what's going on with the Tennessee quarterback situation. That would make me feel a little bit more comfortable in taking one of these. But, the Texans at plus 460 is the play. I mean, Gardner Minshew has been fun, and the Colts have been handling business. So, I mean, they're 1-point favorites, I believe, is what the line is most recently against Houston at home. But a fun game. I think that's going to be a shootout game. I think we're going to see a lot of points, and I think CJ Stroud is that guy. Coming back off of an injury, last week, to be able to handle business. I love how the defense is playing. I think they're very opportunistic and can take some chances against Gardner Minshew and this team, and the Colts defense has been a little bit suspect to me as of late. So I think that has some merit. The thing about the Titans is, this will be the first time in some time for Vrabel to not be getting this team ready for the playoffs. And so I'm interested to see, because this is a team that I usually will take every time that I get when they're at home and as a dog, because of how Mike Vrabel coaches this team. And so they are out of it, but I think he still, has respect for the game enough to say that, if we can, take it to, one of our division rivals, like, let's go ahead and do that and handle business. They do have some, offensive pieces that I think they still want to get looked at. Ryan Tannehill, if he ends up starting this game, he's, is he trying to play for a new spot? Because he's likely not in Tennessee next year. So a lot of narratives there that speak to me. And Jacksonville is just, they're struggling. I mean, Trevor Lawrence missed his first game, and we saw what that meant to this team. And CJ Beathard being the backup quarterback there, it's just hard to kind of trust them right now. And I've been saying that, for quite some time. So why would I stray away from that now? I love the Texans. We've talked about them multiple times this year. I pull for CJ. It is interesting to me that in the rookie of the year market, that is, his number has dropped significantly. Yeah. He's only minus 850 to win the award. And he had been like 20-1 like 2 weeks ago. So I think that's like a very interesting scenario that's kind of reared its head. But if they're in the playoffs and they win this game against the Colts, like it's a sure gone conclusion that this guy's winning the award. I think it is now, but I just can't believe that it dropped so significantly. That is a little bit worrisome.
Right. And Nakua having rookie records in his sights. He may have broken it on Sunday. I can't recall for sure on that one. But rookie receiving yardage records and things like that. Like, I understand why that has shifted, but like CJ Stroud, like you said, if he gets into the playoffs, going to be hard to deny him that award. I had the Texans favored in this game, 51.2% to win against the Colts. No shocker. I've been on the Texans basically every game that Stroud has been healthy so far this year. So not a huge surprise there. And I do agree with you that the Titans will be pretty frisky in this game. The spread was 4.5 yesterday. I think it went to 5.5 once the news came out that Lawrence should be good to go. The wording was intends to play this weekend. That doesn't mean he will be able to. Right. So like, I think there is some value in the Titans. Titans money line is plus 190. I think that I'd rather take a swing at the Titans or the Texans or Colts if I thought that the Titans win that game. Take a look at the divisional market and bet the Colts or Texans, depending on who you think he wins, rather than taking the Titans money line there, because you'll get better, more favorable odds there. And again, I think that the Texans should be very slight favorites in that game. So plus 460 for the Texans, I think, is also pretty intriguing. So I do agree with you there, Ryan, as well. Let's start with the NFC South right now. The Bucs are minus 245. Saints are plus 370. Situation there is, if the Bucs win against the Panthers on Sunday, they win this division. So effectively, it's the same thing, where if you're betting on the Saints or Falcons, you're betting against the Buccaneers as they take on the Panthers. So any interest for you at the Saints or Falcons in that one, or is it a stay away because it's the Panthers on the opposing side?
Yeah, for me, I don't know how anybody can trust the Falcons at this point. I mean, this team is like so far gone. If there's any, if there's any consolation to that, shout out to my hometown team, the Chicago Bears. Like it's been a season. Five home wins in a row. 5-2 in their last 7 games, I believe. So they're doing what they can to handle business. But I digress. I mean, I just don't believe in Atlanta, and I would hate to see Atlanta in the playoffs. Like I really would. So that just has me as a little bit biased in where this division is. I mean, I've been banging the drum for Tampa Bay so much this year. I feel like that's the one thing that the covering the spread community can like hit its hat on, is if we
Bucks and Texans. Yeah.
Yes. That in the Texans. Yeah. They've been listening to the show. Like we've just kind of been beating the drum. I mean, it shaped up so perfectly for Tampa Bay to be in a scenario like this that I do have faith in them to be able to handle business against Carolina. I think there's a lot kind of riding on this for Tampa Bay. One being with Baker Mayfield, because, we'll talk about the market in a little bit, but I do think there's some merit for him being comeback player of the year. The Saints have just kind of, they put themselves in this position. I mean, they kind of had, the driver's seat for a little bit of time this season, and were reeling, and Derek Carr, was out for a little bit of time, and they're playing the Falcons at home. I think they should be able to handle business there. It's just I believe Tampa Bay will as well too. So I think the interesting merit then becomes like, what's the New Orleans Saints? What are the New Orleans Saints outlook like going forward after week 18? Because we're going to have a matchup between, two NFC North teams, and the Bears and Packers. And if the Bears play spoiler, at Green Bay, this will be the second year in the row, by the way, that Green Bay has an opportunity to get into the playoffs, and a divisional opponent can beat them on week 18 at Lambeau to knock them out. So we might still see the Saints, in the playoffs without winning the division. But I think the division is Tampa Bay's to lose for sure.
How wild would it be to have 2 NFC South teams make it, given how much we've just dumped on them the entire year?
It would be rightfully so. Like the way that this season has gone, Jim, it just, it has reason to play out that way.
Yeah, it's been a weird year for sure. So, you can't rule it out. It's only a 3-point spread in Lambeau for that Packers-Bears game too. So it's not totally out of the question. We could see both the Buccaneers and Saints make it. I agree with you that both those teams, the Bucs and Saints, should be able to take care of business. And I hope they do so by 6 points and 4 points respectively, as a little sneak preview of what I'm talking about later on in the show. Any other futures you want to lock in before we get to week 18, Ryan?
Yeah, I thought it was, like I said, the player market is very interesting to me. I think Flacco is the second favorite behind DeMar Hamlin now, which I guess has merit to it, but he hasn't played the full season. Like, I get the narrative that Joe Flacco kind of comes in and, but it's not to win the division. It's just to get them into the playoffs. And it's not like they're on some type of playoff drought. Like they've made it in 2 out of Stefanski's 4 seasons there. So for him to be plus 105 that close to DeMar Hamlin, I mean, we didn't talk about this market a lot this year, but I feel like in the beginning, it kind of was like when we were going through the spectrum, it was DeMar Hamlin's to kind of not even lose, but it just felt like it was his award. Like if he goes out there and just even plays, a couple snaps, like what happened last year. But now, you're seeing the scenario here. The Baker Mayfield narrative, like him winning the division, like taking over for Tom Brady, it's 16-1 here. We're just looking at the market there. Like, if I lose out on 16-1, I'm going to be okay with that. I don't know how you can really take Joe Flacco being that close to DeMar Hamlin and feel okay. I think it's weird. I mean, how much money has to be coming on him for him to be plus 105, but that would not sit well for me to give Joe Flacco the award over a guy like Baker Mayfield if he's able to win the division and has played the full season. It just, it's not like Joe Flacco's winning the division, or it's not like they wrapped up the number 1 seed or anything like that. He did what he had to do with this team to come in and get them to the playoffs, and I think it's a great story, but not necessarily for this market. And then when we're looking at futures here, I just gotta go back to them. I just gotta see what it's like for Kansas City to go on the road here. They're now for Super Bowl odds. I'm not sure. I think they're in the 400s when we're talking about conferences, but plus 850 for Super Bowl. It's still Patrick Mahomes. Like, it's still Andy Reid. I know what the narrative has been all year. The offense looked broken, and this is somebody who was hammering this team in DFS this past weekend because the spot just shaped up so well. But, the two things that I think are different with this Kansas City team that haven't been there in the past necessarily is the defense is playing really well. Like, they've played really well to kind of mask a lot of what the offensive woes have been. And Isaiah Pacheco coming into the fold here has been absolutely outstanding. Like this, they haven't had a running back situation like this. Jerick McKinnon, shout out to him. Like, he did what he needed to do when his number was called. But Pacheco is a force. And if this offense, Rashee Rice is coming into his own, and, McCole Hardman's coming back. He's been there before with this team. Travis Kelce, if they just come together and can rectify some of these things, like, it's still the freaking Chiefs. And so, we're getting these numbers on them right now. Like, let's take some shots on the defending champs, because, would it shock us to kind of see them in that type of situation? I don't think so. That being that close to Buffalo, I think the money on Buffalo was last week. I think that's when you wanted to kind of get in on it because it felt nice. But yeah, that's kind of my thing right now is with the Chiefs, just looking at them in that regard. And then we do have some, interesting, kind of scenarios here in the playoff market as well, too. Just with the Texans, they're minus 105 to make the playoffs. The Saints are plus 250 to make the playoffs, which I think is, definitely a shot enough to take, close to 3-1 on them. Seattle's in that kind of same vein, too, I believe. Plus 270. Yeah. So, there's a little bit that needs to break their way as well, too. But a lot of these teams, just got to win. So I think we'll take some chances there.
Yeah. And I think that going back to the Chiefs, Isaiah Pacheco, shout out to him for winning me a dynasty championship because he is the best running back of all time. One thing to keep in mind is the Bills are not guaranteed to make the playoffs. If the Steelers win on Saturday and the Bills lose on Sunday night, they're not in. And that opens up that takes away a lot of the threat in that conference. So keep that in mind with the Chiefs, keep that in mind with the Ravens, honestly, and other teams as well. Because if we do see the Bills miss it, that's going to open up a big void where there is a bit less talent in the AFC once we get to the playoffs. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind when it comes to the Chiefs as well. That is Ryan Williams. Make sure you check him out on Twitter at @RyanAlexander_W. I believe we have a Monday night game for the first round of the playoffs. So looking forward to that. We'll be back with you again next Tuesday, Ryan, to check in on things we get set for the first round of the playoffs. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you once again soon.
Yes, sir. I can't wait, man. Have a good one. We'll talk to you guys later.
All righty. Same to you. That is, again, Ryan Williams. Check him out on Twitter at @RyanAlexander_W. And we'll get back here on the show once again in the very near future. We're going to dive on in to week 18 and dig into where my numbers show value across this week in just 1 second. But first, the NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there is still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, bets in the new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only, $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, Colorado, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700, visit ksgamblinghealth.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana, visit mdgamblinghealth.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's dig in now to NFL week number 18 and outline where my models see value across this week over at FanDuel Sportsbook. And I do show value in the total for the two biggest games of the week. That is the Texans and the Colts, and also the Bills and the Dolphins. Let's start things off with that Sunday night game between the Texans and the Colts. I like the under in this game. 47.5 is -115 right now over at FanDuel Sportsbook. And the Colts operate at a very quick pace, which is why we're going to see high totals for the games pretty often. This one, I think, is a bit too high, though. You can understand why it is up here, given the Texans got a pretty poor secondary. Derek Stingley, very opportunistic, which is good, but overall, not the best secondary. And CJ Stroud's healthy, so you're going to get pushback on both sides of this game. But Indianapolis's offense has seemed to slow down a bit of late. They posted below average marks in early down passing efficiency in 9 of the past 12 games. So with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, they've been feisty for sure, but they're not the most efficient team on early downs through the air. As for Houston, they are more efficient now that Stroud is back, but they do still tend to be a bit more run heavy than you'd like. And that not only drains clock, but also keeps them from being as efficient as they potentially could be were they to lean more into the passing game. So, a couple factors at play here. Indy's offense, a bit suspect. Texans, more run-heavy than you would like. As a result, I've got this number closer to 44 than 47. And if you take the under of 47.5, that allows you to get a win on a key number of 47. So, I understand why this number is where it is, but I think it's a bit too high given the way the Texans operate, given the fact that the Colts have slowed down a bit offensively. I think there's enough here to justify taking a look at the under. 47.5 again is -115 right now over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Again, I got the Texans at 51.2% to win this game. Their money line -106, so no value there, unfortunately. So I can't go back to my Texans one more time in the regular season, but hopefully we can bet them in the playoffs and talk about them again in the show later on. As mentioned, I do have a bet as well for the Bills and the Dolphins on Sunday night, and that is also an under. So we are leaning pretty heavily on the unders in these games for the two fun games for this week. Under for the Bills Dolphins at 49.5 is -110. Another fun game. I just don't think I'd expect quite this many points. The total does get a boost via all the injuries for the Miami defense. Xavier Howard questionable right now. You've got Bradley Chubb out. Jalen Phillips already out as well. So they've lost a lot of key guys on their defense. But they've also got injuries on offense. Jalen Waddle potentially on the wrong side of questionable. Maybe he does play with this being effectively a must-win game. Tua Tagovailoa's left shoulder is now banged up as well. Now, the Dolphins, to Mike McDaniel's credit, have done an awesome job overcoming injuries this entire year and last year as well. But it does add up when you have that many key injuries to important players on offense. As for the Bills, they become very run heavy recently. Their early down first half pass rate under Joe Brady as OC is 53.6%. That is down from 60.4% under Ken Dorsey. Now, that's not a bad thing. They've been very effective running, both with Josh Allen and James Cook. So why not lean into it? And they have. It's been a very effective approach for them. But running does drain the clock, which is good for an under, even if the team is efficient and it is optimal for the offense. So not criticizing, just saying it is better for an under than for an over. It is possible you could see another high-scoring game here like we saw when these two teams met earlier on this year, the Bills winning a blowout there. But these two offenses are very different now. The Dolphins are banged up offensively, and the Bills are a bit more run-heavy than they were back then. I've got this total personally at 45.9. That gives us quite a bit of space to go towards the under here and feel pretty good about that. So again, under 49.5 is minus 110 at FanDuel Sportsbook. There was a 50.5 available yesterday. So as always, check to see what you can get. But even if the best you can get is 49.5, I do think there is value in the under at minus 110. So, you know, bit of a buzzkill to bet the under on two very fun games for this week, but we're getting wins on key numbers of 47 for the Texans and the Colts, and a win on a key number 49 for the Bills and Dolphins. So I do think that even though it's not as fun to bet an under, I do think that is the right way to tackle both of these games on Saturday and Sunday night. As mentioned with Ryan, I do show some value in both the NFC South teams that need wins this week. Like both, there are three actually, but both of the teams that are favored for this week, we'll say. I like the Bucs minus 5.5 and the Saints minus 3.5 in their respective games. Buccaneers taking on the Panthers, and the Panthers 2 weeks ago, week 16, showed a spark offensively against the Packers. And that gave me some hope. They may be okay. They're figuring things out. They've been a bit more run heavy. Maybe that's allowing them to unlock some potential in this offense. Last week, though, kind of erased all those gains. And I think that allows us to look at the broader picture for the Panthers. And the broader picture says we can lay the points with Tampa Bay in this game. Tampa Bay's offense is, you know, far too dependent on early down or on late down magic in order to be a sustainable offense. We talked about this with Ed this past week, and that's why Ed was on the Saints plus 2.5 in that game. So, like, we can nitpick the Bucs and say they've got some pretty key flaws offensively. But I have a model that penalizes the Bucs pretty heavily for being inefficient on early downs and leaning on late down magic. In that model, the one that should view them pretty poorly as a result, they're still favored by 6.3 in this game against the Panthers. So even when we do ding them quite a bit for being dependent on late down magic, they're still more heavily favored than the spread. The other model does view things more broadly, and that one has them favored by around 9 points. J.C. Horn, unable to go last week for the Panthers. Pregame warmups, had a toe injury, so he could not play, and it allowed C.J. Beathard to put up respectable efficiency numbers en route to a 26-0 victory. Even in the games since Horn returned, the Panthers' defense has still been just fine. Other teams have been able to move the ball effectively against the Panthers on early downs, both on the ground and through the air. The concern here in laying the 5.5 would be that the Bucs lean into their rushing attack, which is the worst in football for the second consecutive year, and that could keep them from covering a somewhat big number on the road. It does help, at least, that doing that, being run heavy, is less of a blunder against this defense than most, given how bad they've been against the Russians here. Better recently, but still not great by any means. So I buy into what the model is saying for this game. The model says to lay the points, and the model doesn't account for the fact that the Bucs have more motivation than the Panthers to win this game. I don't think it should, frankly. That's why it doesn't, but it doesn't hurt at all. So I'm fine laying the 5.5 with the Bucs in the spot. That is minus 110 at FanDuel Sportsbook. As mentioned, also showing value in the Saints minus 3.5 as they take on the Atlanta Falcons for this game. It's kind of buying into what Ryan said too, where the Falcons, they were a team I bet on this past week, did not go well there. And there's kind of a team that has bad vibes right now, and vibes don't matter. Vibes don't play in the model, but the model does show value 3.5. And again, it doesn't hurt to have bad vibes. They can still make the playoffs. So both sides of this game are motivated to win. So again, motivation not a factor here. It's just that I think the Saints are a decently better team. The Saints have had their ups and downs throughout this year, but when you look at the team as a whole, they're actually 11th in my power rankings. I think that's kind of high, honestly, given that got offensive linemen yelling at Derek Carr. The defense has been banged up and not as good recently, but they're respectable on both offense and defense. And 11th is kind of in that like firm middle of the NFL. So it's not like super, super high, but Atlanta ranks 23rd, despite the fact their defense has been better than what I expected going into this year. The Saints should have good success if they air it out on early downs. They rank 7th in early down schedule adjusted passing efficiency, while Atlanta 28th defensively. That's been Atlanta's big bugaboo this year, is when teams have aired it out against them on early downs. The Falcons have excelled against the rush and on late downs. So if the Saints are willing to go to the air, they should be able to move the ball pretty effectively. They would get a downgrade here if Alvin Kamara can't go. He got a sprained ankle, but it does sound like there is a pretty realistic chance he is able to go. When you combine my two models together, I've got the Saints favored by 5.3 here. So I'm okay laying the 3.5 in one of the bigger games of this week, one of the bigger games of this year. I think it is okay to lay the 3.5 with the Saints in this matchup with the Falcons. So again, my 4 bets this week are the Saints minus 3.5, minus 110, the Buccaneers minus 5.5 at minus 110, and then the under for the 2 primetime games, under 49.5 for the Bills and Dolphins, and under 47.5 at minus 115 for the Texans and Colts. Before we finish up for this week, got to go back through recommendations here from last week on the show, and a very good week for the show this past week, in large part due to Dr. Ed Feng. Find his work on Twitter at The Power Rank and check him out at thepowerrank.com. 4-1 week for Ed overall across college football and the NFL. Starting things off with last night's game in the college football playoff semifinals. Ed had J.J. McCarthy over 15.5 rushing yards at minus 114. McCarthy had a long design run on their final drive to take to force overtime. That got him to 25 rushing yards, and he stayed there. So McCarthy over 15.5 rushing yards minus 114 was a winner for Ed. And then the late game, Ed had Washington plus 4.5 at minus 115. And Washington won that game outright. There was some uncertainty around whether they'd win at that final drive, but hey, they were going to cover 4.5 regardless. So good call by Ed there. The model said Washington 2-point dogs for Ed. So good gap between the model and the market. And it did come through with a win there for Washington at plus 4.5. Final one for Ed in college football was Jalen McMillan over 78.5 receiving yards for Washington. McMillan did have a touchdown, but overall wasn't a huge factor in that game. His snap rate, they rotate a lot at receiver, and you saw that kind of manifest in that game last night. But McMillan went under. That was minus 114 where Ed wanted it to go, but did get the touchdown, was a contributor, just couldn't quite get the win there. So 2-1 for Ed on the college football side of things. And then the NFL, clean sweep for Ed. He had the Lions plus 5.5 against the Cowboys. Obviously couldn't get the money line, but didn't need it because Ed had the plus 5.5 on the Lions against the Cowboys in that game on Saturday night. So good call by Ed there. And then finally, as mentioned, he had the Saints plus 2.5 against the Buccaneers. And the Saints in the first half really just rolled in that game, kind of flashed some of the flaws in this Buccaneers team. So good call by Ed across the board there. 4-1 week for Ed. Find Ed on Twitter at The Power Rank. Check him out at thepowerrank.com. Ed is back with us again tomorrow to break down the championship game between the Michigan Wolverines and the Washington Huskies. That'll be up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed in the afternoon, and FanDuel TV Plus and the FanDuel YouTube page as well. And it'll preview NFL Week 18 with us on Thursday. I had a 3-1 week in the NFL for this week. The one loss was on the Falcons. I had a layered bet between their money line and their spread. The money line was plus 136. The spread was plus 3 at minus 115. And the Falcons money line did get movement in my favor throughout the week. I think they closed around plus 126 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Didn't matter. They were the worst team in this game. They could not come close to covering, despite the fact they had a kind of fluky 75-yard touchdown to Tyler Algier. The Bears were the better team. So did not deserve to win that bet and did not. Other three, though, with the Packers money line at plus 110, had that before the news that the Vikings would start Jaron Hall over Nick Mullins. Honestly, didn't care. I didn't think it mattered too much who they went with there. So the Packers plus 110, easy win there. I had the Bills and Pats over 40.5 and minus 110. This game finished with 48 total points. I thought it might go over in the first half. So it went over pretty early in the second half, and I don't think there were any other points scored for the rest of the game. So didn't have to track it, luckily, but pretty easy win as far as time goes, but a bit closer than I thought it might be based on the way the first half went. But 48 total points at over 40 and a half at minus 110. And finally, on the Saturday night game, I had the Cowboys and Lions under 53.5 minus 110. Easy win there, 20-19 final score in that game. So hopefully that sets the tone for this week too, as we're taking unders on the two primetime games once again, Texans, Colts, and Bills, Dolphins. But overall, really good week for the show. Probably our best week overall so far this year as far as the recommendations went. As Ed went 4-1 and I went 3-1. Hopefully we can run it back and do it again in week 18. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. Once again, a big thank you to Ryan Williams for joining us. Back with us once again next Tuesday. Find Ryan on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can find me on Threads at Jim.Sonis. And you can find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Tomorrow, championship game preview between Michigan and Washington with Dr. Ed Feng. NFL Week 18 preview coming up on Thursday. NFL props your way on Friday as well. All right here in the Covering the Spread podcast feed. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or over on Spotify. We'll talk to you all once again tomorrow. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.